While teasing Sylvia about her engagement with Chinyu, the party eventually reached the bottom as the researchers were packing up and getting ready to evacuate to the surface. Giving them some simple orders, Nantian gestured for Shiro and the others to proceed without worrying. Exiting the station, Shiro immediately felt the change in atmosphere as it was strangely devoid of mana. Creating a small ice spear in her hands, it dissolved immediately as the mana was transferred towards the egg. Taking a step towards the egg, Shiro stepped off the metal floor and onto, and now strangely flesh-like floor of the cave. Veins on the floor pulsed, as she could see crystals growing from the surface. From the ceilings, strings of flesh dangled loosely with crystals falling off the edges and into a small pile below the strings. In the center of the cave, the egg pulsed with rhythmic beats. There was a slight transparency to the shell that was never there before. But even with this transparency, Shiro couldn't see what was inside the egg at all. Furrowing her brows, she tried to see what's inside with Analysis EX, but it was still foggy like before. Asmodeus, do you happen to know any information about this egg? Considering the fact that you are an ancient lord after all, Shiro asked as Asmodeus was silent for a moment before shaking his head. Unfortunately, no. As much as I want to say yes, I do not have any recollection of an egg that produced crystals that amplify mana. In fact, if more people knew about this, they would have waged wars to obtain a large supply, especially the gods. Asmodeus replied while picking up a few of the crystals. They flickered with a quick spark of light before becoming dull with all of their mana drained from them. Tossing them away since they were now useless, Asmodeus stood silently. Is that so? Surprising considering your background, but I suppose this is quite the anomaly. Shiro shrugged as Asmodeus immediately understood that Shiro knew who he was. Curling his lips into a smile, Asmodeus bowed. I do apologize about that, Miss Shiro. Even with my background, there is not much I can tell from just an egg and crystals I never knew about. Perhaps I might be able to find something similar in nature, but that's doubtful. It's fine, don't worry. Shiro waved her hand while circling the egg. Making a few mental notes, Shiro gestured for them to sit and wait on the research lab roof. With only a few moments left until the second half of the new age, there was nothing else to do aside from observing the changes until the time comes. Walking over to Shiro, who had sat down on the roof, Asmodeus stood in silence before opening his mouth. If you don't mind me asking, Miss Shiro, what exactly is your goal for this world? What do you hope to gain from the second half of the new age? He asked curiously as Shiro glanced back. Well, it used to be revenge against a god, but now, I just want the world to not be on the verge of destruction. Let the people live a peaceful life. There might be some danger. There might be aggression between people, but it'll be safer than what the world is now. I suppose you can say this. If I can, I would remove the system. If you want a society with this kind of power, the power to shatter entire cities, then you need one party to keep them in check. A tyranny, I suppose. But that's not what I want. Therefore, a place where no one can have power that can destroy a city is probably the best call. Though who am I to judge? Haha, I'm just someone who likes to fight a lot. Shiro smiled while looking at the crystals dangling from the ceiling. Plus, it's not like I wanted this role. I was just fine with being an adventurer who went from place to place gaining strength until I could kill my worst enemy. I was just swept along into this role and figured I should do something good with this. Shiro admitted before looking back at Asmodeus. So to answer your question, what I hope for this world is for it to not be destroyed by the power of the gods. Make it so that its peaceful and low-level cities won't get dominated by those with more power, Shiro said as she stood up. Now, since I've answered your question truthfully, I do hope that you can do the same for me. What's Asgard's stand on everything? Shiro asked as her eyes flickered for a moment. Circuits could be seen in her iris as Asmodeus realized that she was fishing out the truth. Chuckling for a moment, Loki waved her hand and separated herself from Asmodeus's body. She had long blue hair and multicolored eyes that seemed to shimmer with different hues every moment. Patting her outfit, she bowed in front of Shiro. Pardon my rudeness. With my divinity, it's only natural for me to take on a disguise. I was content with watching the play from afar, but after some observation, I simply could not hold back anymore. The more I look into your city, the more I am impressed. As for Asgard's stance, this I cannot say as my father is still thinking about it. He remains an observer until he can determine the danger you possess. Though personally, I think there is nothing to worry about. Loki chuckled. Therefore, Miss Shiro, I will continue to observe and give you clues when I can. I usually like to play around, but with how things are, even I know when to be serious. MN. So I suppose you're somewhat akin to a spy within the Norse pantheon that is helping me then. Shiro smiled. Something similar. And with that, I shall take my leave. Oh, and I was being honest earlier. It is indeed better if you were to deal with the beings that appear. When I take over someone, I do snag some of their memories. Oh, don't worry, I know, Shiro said, gesturing to her eyes as Loki started to fade into smoke. Seeing this, Loki smiled and did one last bow before disappearing completely. With Loki disappearing, Shiro glanced over at Asmodeus, who was now sleeping, and decided to wake him up. URG, what happened? Asmodeus muttered while clutching his head. A god borrowed your body for a while. Don't worry, nothing major was done. You should go back to Madison and help her out on the surface, Shiro said as Asmodeus furrowed his brows and stood up. He was still confused, but seeing Shiro's expression, he guessed that he wasn't getting any more answers. Therefore, he bowed and teleported out of the area. I wonder if there are any other pantheons that'll contact you before the new age begins, Nimue asked while floating around the mana realm. Now that the destructive energy was gone, it felt much easier to move around. I doubt it since there's only a few minutes left now. If they are, they better keep their chats short, ha. Shiro chuckled as it felt nice being able to talk to Nimue like this again. True, but I wouldn't be surprised. So what's your plan for these beings that Loki mentioned then? Nimue asked curiously as she didn't know anything about this. Well, considering the fact that they're apparently made to counter anything and everything on this side of the world, I'll need to use creation energy. I've already made some progress with this Velger's notes, but this might help me develop it properly. Who knows? The beings may even be made up of creation energy since they counter destruction. Regardless, I'll be counting on you to keep my body working. Don't want to shut down randomly mid-fight. Shiro stuck her tongue out since she knew the sort of damage creation energy could do to her body. After using it during the last experiment, she felt very fatigued along with a numbness in her arm. She figured that it was because her body had been used destruction energy and the influx of creation caused a backlash. However, now that Nimue was here to help heal her body along with Aram, who had developed her new skill, there should be more room for error when she experiments with the creation energy, something that she'll be able to test very soon as the countdown reaches the final minute. Looking at the time, Shiro narrowed her eyes at the egg. Little by little, it reached 0. Welcome to the second half of the age of demons and gods. May the gods have mercy upon you. Watching the timer reach 0 along with the announcement, Shiro suddenly felt an influx of mana explode out from the land. Feeling the density of the area multiply in an instant, it felt like she was hit in the head with a sledgehammer due to her sensitivity. However, that feeling disappeared instantly as all of the mana flowed towards the egg, causing its heartbeat to increase in volume. As though the land itself had a beating heart, each beat would cause the ground around them to fracture and break. Just as Shiro was about to jump up and fly, she noticed the mana in the surroundings being disrupted to the point where flight was unstable. Quickly adjusting her cast so that it focuses on her rather than her surroundings, Shiro grabbed Nantion and flew upwards to avoid the earthquake. Well, this is quite the reaction from the world, isn't it? If anything, I'd say it's worse than the first transformation a while back, Nantion said with a frown as Shiro had the same thought. She could only wonder what will happen to the queens that had set their city on the group. However, she had no time to think about that right now as she had more pressing matters to deal with. She could sense several clusters of mana appeared nearby. While most of them were towards the surface where everyone else is at, there were quite a few that were appearing below ground. Plus, to make matters worse, there was a strange strand of energy that was flowing towards the clusters, changing their composition completely into something foreign. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro was about to open her mouth when Nantion spoke first. You sense them as well, don't you? After receiving a blessing from Hemera, I noticed an increased sensitivity towards anything that's light, and by extension, creation, I suppose. Though only barely. Even then, I can sense the strands of creation within the pools of mana gathering near us. Care to explain, or should I just imagine this as the world giving you a giant middle finger again? Nantion asked as Shiro chuckled. Let's just say they're here to take out this anomaly. Shiro shrugged. Controlling his mana so that he could fly, Nantion floated on his own as summoning circles could be seen gathering around the base of the egg. Usually, Shiro would try to dispel the magic, but she had use for them, so she allowed them to be summoned. After all, it wasn't often that she could come across a being that was from the side of creation. She needed to take this time to study them in detail. That's rather unexpected. I figured they would claw through like savages rather than summon. Nimue muttered as she was helping Shiro regulate the mana flow around her body so that it wasn't sucked away by the egg. True, but it's more concerning that it's being summoned rather than naturally spawning. It means some F***er is sending them to us, though I'm guessing it's sent by someone who probably sent the watchman to take care of abnormalities. Shiro replied while sending some ice out to create a small platform for herself. Anchoring herself against one of the walls, she sent her senses out to see what was happening above ground with Madison and the others. Seeing that it wasn't looking any better except hordes of monsters were spawning in rapid succession, Shiro sighed and scratched her head. If you're worried about the surface, then don't worry. I took the time to design something a little special for them. Well, those that were lower level. Nantion laughed as Shiro raised an eyebrow. Sending her senses out once more, she noticed that some of them reached into their inventory to pull out a small nanotech capsule that they threw down. Dismantling itself, it rearranged its form into a mounted mini-gun with rocket turrets on the sides. Jumping in, they immediately sent waves upon waves of bullets towards the enemies while the melee people watched. They were prepared to tank for the gunners should the monsters get too close. Of course, Madison was an exception. Stomping her foot down, a giant Tier 8 magic circle spread out across the ground and immediately restrained all the monsters that stepped foot on the trap. Raising her hand, demonic energy gathered around her palm and shot out towards all of the monsters that were trapped. Once the energy entered their body, they immediately started to writhe in anguish as bones and spikes erupted out from their body, transforming them into something akin to a bone demon. All of you, heed my word, Madison shouted out as the demons raised their heads. Kill them all and leave none alive, she commanded as they immediately turned towards the other monsters and rushed forth with suicidal vigor. Seems like Madison has her side covered, so let's take of these guys quickly, though I will say that they require a small trick to kill. Or so I assume with the information I have. Shiro smiled as Nantion nodded his head. Glancing down, he could see that the summoning circle had completed itself, letting out a radiant pillar of light. They could see armored figures within the center of each circle. Each figure towered over the average man as their physique was slim and elongated to an abnormal degree. They each wore pristine white armor that had golden highlights around the edges of each plate. A faint neon blue glow could be seen under the armor as spectral wings unfurled from their backs. Suddenly, their armor started to shift as it covered the wings and gun barrels started to form on their shoulders. Widening her eyes in shock, Shiro immediately recognized the foundation of the armor to be nanobots. Feeling danger overwhelm her senses, she immediately grabbed Nantion by the collar and dragged him back while trying to form a barrier with her left hand. Asterisk, boom. A beam of pure creation energy shot up and disintegrated her barrier in an instant, taking her arm along with it as she hissed in pain. Gah, bloody hell. Shiro cursed out as her arm instantly regenerated itself with Nimue's help, but the recovery was slower than usual. The usual situation would be Shiro not even getting injured. However, the beam of light took out her arm, while also trying to corrupt her entire body in an attempt to render her to a blank state of being. You shouldn't take any more hits like that. Had you not retracted what was left of your arm quickly, you might be on the ground having a spasm due to the creation energy. Nimue warmed while the entire mana continent started to erupt with water in an attempt to heal Shiro's body. I know, Shiro shouted back as she immediately entered her soul maiden form. Choosing ice as the base element, she breathed out a mouthful of cold air to create a barrier between them for now. Meanwhile, Nantion, after being tossed away to safety by Shiro, activated his blessing he received from Hemera. Golden energy pulsed around his body as though he had been set on fire, and 9 orbs of light rotated behind him. Grabbing one, it transformed into a sword while the others shot towards the radiant knights that broke past Shiro's ice barrier without any troubles. Switching spots with one of the orbs that appeared in front of the knights, Nantion grabbed their head and pierced it through with his sword. Asterisk crack, twisting the blade so that it ripped the head off their body. Nantion was shocked to see that they were beings of pure energy. Quickly sewing itself together, the knight grabbed Nantion by the throat and slammed him into the wall of the cave and prepared to stab him in the chest. Asterisk bang. Before the knight could, Shiro appeared behind him and kicked him in the face, causing it to get torn off from the force. They can't be destroyed using destruction, and they counter everything that comes from our side of the universe. If you can, try not to fight them directly. Use your passive to guard me. I'll figure something out, Shiro shouted as she immediately teleported Nantian up, while two knights cleaved through the wall. Grabbing their arms, Shiro snapped them in half before summoning Iriel. The moment she did, all of the knights seemed to enter a frenzy as their blue glows transitioned to a dark red. I'll be honest, they give me a creepy feeling and I don't think I can do much about them. Iriel replied truthfully as Shiro slashed through one of the knights only for her mana to be sucked away. Quickly jumping back, Shiro clicked her tongue and unsummoned Iriel. Loki did mention that they're from the creation side of the things. It's no wonder that my attack won't work. Thinking to herself, Shiro decided to activate error in her arm. Feeling the sting followed by numbness, Shiro focused on the knight in front of her and pierced his chest, ripping out several strands of bluish code that was unlike anything she had seen in this world. The hell, Shiro muttered as she was reading it. However, before she could finish, she sensed danger behind her and immediately jumped into the rift. But before she could close the entrance, one of the knights grabbed her leg and dragged her out before slamming her against the wall. Coughing out a mouthful of blood, Shiro glared at the knights before activating one of the skills, Goddess of War and Protection. Immediately designating Nantian and Madison as her champions, her aura flared as a golden light radiated from her eyes. Golden markets appeared on her body while Nantian could feel a wave of energy bursting through his body. With this now activated, Shiro could control her divinity to its current limit. But because it was sealed, there was no effect, but that was fine as she was looking for the other skill boosts. All allies cannot die. She takes their damage instead. Dead allies or those that she wishes to help will be revived. They get the Blessing of Shiro buff along with the Blessing of War buff. And her champions will gain unique bonuses depending on their class. This skill has no cost, and it lasts for 30 minutes. By her estimations, 30 minutes should be more than enough. As for the buffs, each one was crazy in its own right. Both increase your stats equal to 20% of Shiro's stats. The Blessing of Shiro makes it so that you don't take damage, cannot die, spirits will enhance your attacks, and nanobots will protect you. Meanwhile, the Blessing of War doubles your stats on top of the bonus, and allows you to launch and attack equal to 30% of Shiro's stat. Half of their damage is converted to true damage and 70% elemental resistance. Since creation is technically classed as an element, it should allow Nantian to withstand their attacks. As for the true damage, Shiro wasn't sure as Iriel didn't work, so she assumed that it would deal destruction-type true damage, which these Radiant Knights seem to be immune against as their attacks have barely caused them any harm. Just as she tried to pry herself out of the knight's grip, she noticed that her body had been completely restrained as more knights latched onto her limbs. However, before anything dangerous happened to her, a pillar of energy descended around her, obliterating everything that wasn't her. Glancing up, she could see Nantian casting a Tier 6 magic circle that was slowly fluctuating. There was a faint sign that it was reaching Tier 7, but it was just short. Your champion, huh? A little disappointed that it wasn't anything more, but I had almost forgotten how beefy your stats are considering the boost I just got. Nantian forced a smile as having that much mana pulse through his body in one attack almost sent his entire system of mana links into shock. Care to tell me what kind of unique bonus you got while I check this out? Shiro asked with a smile as she ripped out the code of another knight. Even though she ripped it out, it was quick to disintegrate before repairing itself in the knight's body. My attacks are highly effective on enemies that are in close proximity to you. The more dangerous they are, the more powerful my attacks. While it can't completely deal with these knights, it should give you some room to breathe. Oh, also you don't get harmed, so I can fire your way without worries. Nantian reassured as two knights appeared behind him, but he quickly dodged out of the way and landed next to Shiro. Well, isn't that helpful? Though I must say him. Shiro was about to finish her sentence when she noticed something stirring in her mana continent. Seeing the tree that represented error move and stretch towards the knights, Shiro raised her eyebrow and heard a faint mutter. Eat code. Hearing this, Shiro understood that error must be hungry for the codes of these knights. Even though they repair themselves quickly, error was an anomaly from the system and not restricted to the destruction side of the universe. Taking a deep breath, circuits erupted out from her arms as Shiro glared at the knights. Care to cover my back while I let error eat his breakfast? Shiro asked as Nantian chuckled. Of course, but don't play around too much. Who knows if they will spawn on the surface? We should finish this fast. Nantian smiled. Noted, though I'm sure Madison has it covered. Shiro nodded before dashing towards the knights. Hashtag. Looking at the hordes of monsters that continued to spawn, Madison frowned as each corpse would transform into crystals matching the ones near the egg. Even the demons she create using them would slowly be transformed into crystals while still moving. A harrowing sight, but she had grown used to seeing things like this. Glancing behind her, she could see the ancient lords waiting on her command. There's no reason to send them out just yet. Everyone else can handle the mobs with the guns that Nantion gave them for now. The Mets are doing well too, but they're starting to struggle. Sheena and the specialized pilots are watching by the side, but they should be making a move soon. Madison thought to herself before scratching her head. Geez, they're spawning endlessly. She muttered as Helion walked up beside her. Well, you can say this is a good time for them to get EXP, no? Helion joked as Madison shrugged while leaning against him. True, but I can't help but feel as though something else is at work. I can feel Shiro fighting below us, but if she told us to focus here, it means she should have whatever is happening below covered. Madison replied as a wave of monsters were thrown into the air, destroying the ground in the distance. Madison spotted a colossal monster clawing itself out of the ground with crests carved into its skin, causing blood to spill onto the ice. Meanwhile, on its head, a woman could be seen holding a trident as divine energy radiated from her body. On her head was a bloody carving of the same crest on the monster's skin. Ho seems like one of the queens possessed by a god has come knocking on the door. I wonder who it is. Madison grinned. Just as she took a step forward, she felt a well of energy erupt within her, bolstering her stats while also applying 2 buffs. Glancing over at her interface, Madison grinned menacingly as she gestured to the ancient lords. Go cause some havoc. I'll have a small chat with that god. Immediately flaring their demon aura, the ancient lords charged into the battle as portals opened up with more monsters pouring out in waves. I can't help you yet, but I will soon. Go kick his ass, and I'll keep everyone safe back here. Helion smiled as Madison nodded her head, giving him a kiss on the cheeks. She stomped her foot down and dashed towards the avatar. Meanwhile, the people around them glanced at Helion, who coughed and shouted at them to get back to killing the monsters. Flying through the air, Madison landed near the avatar, crushing 2 monsters beneath her boots while walking towards the god fearlessly. Yo, what has brought you to our humble base? If it's for a holiday, then I must ask you to look for another area, as this place isn't the best for a scenic walk. Madison asked as she tore the monsters apart with her bare hands. Anything that approached her was killed in a matter of seconds as blood coated her body. Divine energy. Wait, no, you're not of any pantheons I know. You're one of the people with that annoying girl. The woman narrowed her eyes as Madison shrugged. Well, there is a sudden spike in destructive energy, so I have come to check it out. If you know what's at stake, it would be wise for you to let our forces through and investigate the situation. The woman said as Madison laughed. If you put it like that, I would want to keep you out no matter what. Madison grinned as she knew that Shiro was who they wanted even though they don't know. After all, she was the firstborn of destruction that they wanted to kill. Are you trying to earn the wrath of the god? The woman growled as Madison smirked. Does this face look like I give a fuck? Clashing her knuckles together, Madison punched the ground in front of her. Asterisk bang, immediately shattering the ice caps in half. The monster that the avatar was riding on lost its footing and started to sink down. Furrowing her brows, the avatar jumped off and threw her trident at Madison. Curling her lips into a grin, Madison laughed out loud before biting down on the trident as it passed her head. Shattering it to pieces, Madison grabbed the 2 halves of the trident and narrowed her eyes. If just my teeth can shatter your weapon, then I must say I'm rather disappointed. Madison chuckled as she threw the pieces back at the avatar. Glaring at her in anger, the avatar jumped back and re-summoned the trident. All of the broken pieces disappeared and reattached itself in her hands as she opened her mouth. You're in the presence of Poseidon, god of the sea. Know your place, she shouted out as divine energy rushed out of her body. Immediately feeling as though she was being suffocated by water, even though it was just divine energy and mana, Madison quickly muttered something under her breath and drew a rune in the air in front of her. A blue mark could be seen around the edges of her eyes as she immediately adapted to what Poseidon had done to the arena, allowing her to move and breathe like usual. If you don't do anything else, then I'll end things quickly, Madison said as her smile faded away. Conjuring up her wheel of demons, she summoned her demonic gauntlets and activated a Tier 7 magic circle. Seal of Wrath, Satan. Her skin turned black as red markings spread out from her heart. 2 horns appeared on her head as armor manifested around her before being attached to her body. Activating one of the 72 demon pillars, Madison teleported behind Poseidon and grabbed him by the back of the head. Punching him in the back, she pierced the avatar's flesh and slammed it into the ground while Poseidon was shocked at her power. Even though the avatar could only hold a fraction of his power and had a weak physique, it should be more than enough to deal with a demigod. And yet, Madison managed to pin him against the ground in a matter of moments. Feeling the anger boil in his heart, Poseidon released a burst of divine energy, pushing Madison off, then slammed his spear down, activating a Tier 8 magic circle. "My name is Poseidon. Tremble before my might and despair," Poseidon shouted out as the sea started to boil. Golden armor wrapped around his body as the skies started to darken. Slamming his trident down once more, giant tidal waves rose up from the sea, threatening to drown the entire North Pole. "Your name is Poseidon, and mine is Madison. Nice to meet you. As for trembling before your might, if you want to make me tremble, then be as strong as Shiro. Aside from her, I tremble before none. I fear no one. No god shall make me bow," Madison shouted out as her own divine energy exploded out. Shocked at the sudden explosion of energy, Poseidon couldn't help but be pushed back as Madison was surrounded by a hurricane caused by the explosion of energy. Her hair fluttered behind her as she was displaying power beyond her normal capacity, thanks to Shiro's buff. As for the unique bonus that she received, all non-demonic energy in the area will be weakened. Gods are no exception. Wrapping herself in demonic energy, Madison's body started to grow as she towered over the battlefield. Behind her, a pair of demon wings unfurled themselves. Behind her, a wheel appeared that contained the sigils of the ancient lords, while her armor started to mutate to fit her new form. Writhing around with life, the armor hissed at the monsters and Poseidon, while Madison started to float upwards. Her body seemed to be made from demonic energy that just her presence caused those that weren't demons to have a hard time breathing. Raising her hand in the air, a Tier 7 magic circle exploded out, clearing the clouds to reveal a blood-red sky where no one could see the sun or the moon. Activating the magic circle, a black and red barrier appeared around the battlefield, preventing Poseidon's attack to reach them as a secondary layer of magic circles appeared. Gritting his teeth in anger, Poseidon decided to burn the life force of the avatar he's occupying to reveal more of his power, but before he could activate his spell, a fist pierced his chest and grabbed onto his ribs. "The big one is just to show off. You really don't think I'm dumb enough to make myself a giant target if there's nothing to wrestle down?" Madison's voice rang out as she tore the god in half, revealing her new form. Rather than the eye-catching form she revealed to get everyone's attention, her new form was a bit simpler. There was a demonic exoskeleton on her back, covering her shoulders, spine, waist, and gave her a tail along with a set of wings. 2 horns could still be seen on her head, but now there were black motes of light that seemed to form a broken crown around her head. The colors of her eyes seemed to have been inverted as the scara was now a bloody red while her iris was pure white in color. Her skin was now gray with blue and black markings, and the armor Helion had created for her fused with the Satan armor she summoned. With Poseidon's avatar now ripped in half, Madison grabbed the 2 halves and immediately converted it to energy before throwing it into her mouth. "TSK, too much salt. I should have mixed it with something else." Madison pouted as the demonic armor started to disintegrate into black and red particles, leaving behind the armor that Helion had created. Once her form returned to normal, she started to make her way back to the main party since this was just a small setback. To her, she couldn't be held back by such weak gods. Her goal was to help Shiro fight the Firstborn. If she was hindered by a normal Tier 2 god, she would be disgusted. ####. Recoiling at the fact that his avatar was torn in half, then eaten by Madison, Poseidon roared towards the skies in anger. "Madison, your head will be mine," he shouted out as he now had to get more sacrifices to be able to descend again. This time he'll take longer to ensure that his main body can go so that he could teach her a lesson. ####. Earlier, Shiro had sensed an eruption of divine energy on the surface as she had just activated air around her arms. Confused as to what was happening on the surface, Shiro wanted to check, but with the knights surrounding the 2 of them, she couldn't focus on other things or else they may get seriously injured. Reaching towards one of the knights, Shiro sent out several strands of circuits in an attempt to wrap them, but their bodies broke into several pieces to avoid the attack. Raising her eyebrows, Shiro could see their fear of error. For other attacks, they would just take it and recover. But for error, they avoided it like a plague. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro had an idea. Don't you King dare Shiro. Nimue warned as Shiro laughed. Don't worry, it'll be fine. Shiro smiled as she allowed error to go past her arms. Little by little, the circuits crawled across her body, from her arms to her chest, to her legs, then her neck. Struggling to reach past the neck, Shiro allowed the circuits to continue for a little longer as she channeled error through her entire body. Opening her eyes, there were now circuit patterns flickering with light within her iris as Shiro threw a dagger and immediately teleported behind one of the knights. Grabbing their shoulder, Shiro could hear a hissing sound as their flesh burned from just the touch. Curling her lips up into a menacing grin, digging her fingers into their body, she slammed her knee against their spine and ripped it in half. Before it could even recover, she threw a ball of circuits inside the knight's ribcage, allowing it to fester and grow before consuming the knight in a writhing mass of circuits that transmitted information about their composition into Shiro's mind. Understanding a little more about what they are, Shiro glanced back and could see the knights backing off in fear as she had become their natural counter in this universe. Well, would you look at that? You were thinking that you're some hot *T earlier, weren't you? Feeling immortal? Should I help you put that to the test? Surely you're not afraid of some circuits now, are you? Shiro asked as Nantion couldn't help but shrug his shoulders with a smile. Truly, her arsenal of weapons and abilities was so diverse that she just needed a moment to solve her problem against these knights. However, he wasn't without ideas. Due to the nature of his class, the blessings he received, and Shiro's buff, he had a small theory of his own. While the knights were distracted by Shiro, Nantion teleported behind one of them and twisted its head off. Plunging his hand into their chest, he focused on channeling his energy to mold them into something useful. Clack. Suddenly, the armor started to disassemble itself and reassemble as a pair of gauntlets that protected his arms. Bingo! Nantion laughed. Due to his buffs and blessings, he was rather proficient in controlling light and bending it to his will. While it was detestable that it was similar to Ikari's power, Nantion figured that he could probably hinder Ikari during their next confrontation. As for his plan with the knights, since they were from the creation side of things, and how their bodies were created from light and creation energy, he could use the light to somewhat control the rest of their body to help him instead. Plus, he wasn't as attuned to destruction as Shiro was, so the rejection wasn't that bad. If anything, all he felt was a little sting, but nothing too bad. But what's most surprising of all was how similar it was to controlling nanobots that Shiro had left in the city. The control process was almost identical except for the fact that it was using creation energy. While he could not control creation, he had walking batteries here to help him out. Adjusting his grip on the knuckles, Nantion looked up to see Shiro glancing towards his direction and gave her a small wave. Seems like you figured a way to use them yourself. Shiro chuckled. Well, it would be rather poor of me to sit down while you do all the work. Plus, I'm having a bit of fun doing some real-time testing on new subjects and energy. If anything, you're starting to rub off on me. Who knew I liked to experiment so much without safety precautions? Nantion laughed, teleporting behind another knight and transforming it into shoulder guards. So the normal result of spending too much time with me? Safety does become optional rather than mandatory. Shiro replied, feeling rather amused as their dire situation was turned around rather quickly. All it took was some experimenting and a hungry error to solve the problem of fighting these radiant knights from the creation side. However, this was still far from properly controlling creation energy. But since there were plenty of subjects, Shiro wanted to take a few home so she could understand creation a little more, while also perhaps learning more about nanobots. Now that the two were armed with weapons that could be used against the knights, both Shiro and Nantion started to clear them out quickly. The portals that had originally opened by the summoning circles had been closed, and the knights had no way to escape. Even though Shiro wanted to use the portal to reach the other side, she knew that there were too many uncertainties around the other side of that portal. If she goes without adequate preparation, it'll end very badly. While she may have said safety was an option, she still needed to be careful. Plus, there were plenty of subjects here for her to experiment on. With Nantion making a suit of armor, she could use that as a basis for her nanobots and research on some knights on the side to speed up the progress. With that in mind, she couldn't kill the rest of the knights since she needed all the knights she could capture. Summoning Iriel once more, Shiro could hear him complain. I'm pretty sure I just told you about how I can't do sh*t to them, right? Iriel asked as Shiro nodded her head. I know, but I'm not planning to use you that way. You're the only weapon I have that can boost my usage of tier 8 time runes. Shiro chuckled as the runes on Iriel's blade lit up with an emerald glow. Activating the runes on the blade, Shiro narrowed her eyes and flashed behind one of the knights. Since the goal wasn't to kill, there was no need to worry if it'll harm them or not, as her plan was to lock them in a stasis, similar to what she did with Niphim. Only this time she hoped to make another skill aside from Avrin, since that one costs 60% of her divine energy for one use. However, with Skill Scholar, making a skill for this should be rather simple. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro activated Analysis EX as her surroundings slowed down to a halt. Quickly formulating what she needed of the skill in her mind, she continued to construct and deconstruct magic circles in her mind to suit her purpose. There's no need to be too concerned about how they're preserved. Unlike Niphim, I'm not trying to help them. They're my experiments. I don't want to degrade their body if possible, since it'll introduce annoying variables into the tests. Wait, since they're mostly energy and nanobots, I can probably transform them like Nantion, then freeze them while they're transformed without worrying that it'll kill them after being paused in time. It'll be similar to what the inventory does. Finalizing her plan in her mind, Shiro pierced her blade through the knight's chest and focused her mind. Overriding the knight's control over his own body using error, she forced his body to collapse in on itself as it compressed down into an orb before being frozen in time. Skill created. Would you like to name the skill? Yes, name it Carson. Shiro replied instantly, as it was the opposite of what Avrin meant in Aria. While Avrin meant everlasting moment, Carson meant stagnated moment, which could also be interpreted as time prison. Skill, Carson created. Carson, and skill that focuses on capturing the target through time. Their comfort is not taken into account, as they are forcefully torn from the flow of time while barely being kept alive. Must be readjusted for different species, or else the lock will fail. The strength of the enemy compared to the caster will also affect the time they are locked up for. However, due to the modifications done, the energy consumption has decreased significantly. Cost, 10% of divine energy. Maximum duration of lock, 1 week. Cooldown, not applicable. Reading the description, Shiro couldn't help but sigh, since this meant that she could only capture 10 of them alive. The rest will need to be killed. I think 10's plenty, no? Nimue raised an eyebrow, but Shiro shook her head. I mean, I guess, but if possible, I wanted to capture the rest of them alive. That would have been the best case scenario, but I suppose this is better than nothing. Shiro replied as she begrudgingly started to select the best specimens for her collection. Meanwhile, Nantion had just finished converting the knights into a suit of armor except for the helmet. He wasn't eager on putting them on his head until everything was tested. Converting one of the knights to a helmet, he placed it into his inventory. Right now, he looked similar to the knights, only more bulky, since he wasn't made of energy. Flying over to Shiro, he could see her annoyed expression while filtering through the knights. I'm guessing there's a restriction to how many you could take. Nantion called out with a smile. I could only take 10 since it takes 10% of my divine energy. It might be annoying to deal with them later if they're not in stasis, so I'll kill the rest of them. Shiro sighed, but setting that aside, seems like you finished your armor. You can probably ask Helion to do some final adjustments so that it's tailored to you, she suggested as Nantion nodded his head. That's the plan. Nantion smiled before turning to the summoning circles that had been turned off once they realized that Shiro could deal with them. Don't worry about that. I plan to get rid of any markers they left behind so they can't come to this spot again. Plus, I think they were targeting my energy, so I doubt they'll come here again unless it's for the egg that's still absorbing energy. Shiro narrowed her eyes at the egg that continued to grow during the fight. Every spell they threw out would have some of its mana get absorbed by the egg. Let's help out on the surface once we get rid of the rest of these guys, Shiro said while massaging her shoulders. Waving her fingers, Shiro created a ball of circuits before slamming her hand down. A giant magic circle appeared as all of the remaining knights were trapped in the activating range. Before they could even react, a ball of circuits appeared beneath their feet as a spear shot up and exploded within them, tearing them into pieces. Before the pieces could disappear and get absorbed by the egg, the circuits expanded and swallowed everything, leaving nothing behind. Drawing air back into her body, Shiro suddenly felt a spike of pain through her body as her flesh started to crumble for a moment before healing itself. Wait, what? Your body should be perfectly fine. Why is it crumbling apart? Nimue asked in confusion as she frantically checked Shiro's condition. Before Shiro could reply, a bundle of circuits extended towards Nimue. It's because Mother channeled my power through her body. She essentially integrated herself with the system. Thankfully, she didn't do it for long, and the power use was small. Or else, she might have lost a good portion of her body to the system. I repurposed some of the creation energy I ate to repair her body through her code. The circuit spoke as Shiro sat down in her mana continent and looked at her arm that still had a crack mark that soon disappeared. Well, that certainly explains it. I suppose it's not a good choice to channel your power through my body. Shiro chuckled as Error shook his head and floated over to Shiro. Mother, when you use my power, you are essentially fusing a portion of your soul to the system. By channeling my power through your entire body, you're attempting to fuse completely with the system, thus your physical body almost crumbled away. Please don't do that again, since you'll essentially become like me. Just energy with no form. The only reason you see circuits are because of the influence of your nanobots. Error sighed as Shiro patted him before smiling. Amen. I'll keep that in mind next time. Standing up, Shiro stretched her body. Unfortunately, we can't rest just yet. There are still monsters to deal with on the surface. Shiro smiled as the two nodded. ####. Opening her eyes, Loki leaned back on her throne and hugged her knees. My. She certainly dealt with that threat rather quickly. I was genuinely worried too, considering the fact that she doesn't have her divinity right now. Who knew she had power to kill things on the side of creation? Loki muttered while observing the destruction on Earth. Watching the queens panic as their city fell, she sighed. Those that didn't have power and rejected the influence of gods had no chance here. Places with little to no divine presence had their city razed to the ground. The previous inhabitants, such as dragons or other mythological beasts, were slaughtered to make way for the new. Fiddling with her hair, Loki snickered. Though the most surprising is still her identity. Who knew she was such a big shot? Honestly, I lucked out by possessing that ancient lord. I should probably warn brother and father. Though, letting them get punished isn't a bad idea. Loki laughed as she jumped up and made her way towards Thor's domain. Mess around a little. Pretty sure Shiro will forgive them as long as they don't do anything stupid. But she's nothing like what the other gods said she was like. I can't see someone like her being a villain. Perhaps the fools of old provoked her and brought destruction upon themselves. Meh, not my problem. I don't think most of the gods know, so it's perfect time to rack up some goody points with her. Sensing Thor nearby, Loki grinned and kicked the air in front of her. Crack ping. Shattering the walls to Thor's domain, Loki hopped through the hole she made. Yo, bro, you there? Loki shouted out as she could see Thor sitting on his throne on top of the mountain. What is it? Did you cause more trouble? Thor asked as he glanced towards Loki. No, trouble? Me? Impossible. I'm so well behaved. Loki stuck out her tongue before teleporting beside Thor and sat down on his armrest. Leaning back, she laid down on his lap. Big bro, I suggest you make friends with the mortals along with Dad. I'll be beneficial to you. Loki smiled as Thor looked down and tapped Loki on her forehead. What are you planning now? Just tell me. He sighed. You know I can't tell you. If I did, you won't change. I know I mess around a lot, but trust me when I say you should make friends with the mortals. Don't subjugate them like they're slaves. Properly become an idol of worship with Father, and life will pave a way for you. If I say too much, then it'll all be for naught. Loki said as she reached up and started to play with Thor's hair. Hearing this, Thor was surprised by Loki's sudden moment of seriousness. While she liked to play around a lot, Thor knew that she didn't mess around when it came to survival. It was also Loki who helped them survive the war where hundreds of pantheons were burned to the ground. Had it not been for her, the Norse pantheon might not have survived. All right, I'll keep that in mind. You shouldn't be messing around either. You should find some mortals to help you so that you can descend. Thor said as Loki giggled before sitting up. Oh, I have my ways. See you, bro. I'll go warn Dad now. Loki waved before disappearing with a wisp of green smoke. Shaking his head, Thor stood up. Crack. Feeling as though a vein was about to burst. Thor looked behind him and saw his throne welded to his body and forcefully torn out of the floor when he stood up. There was a fracture that started to spread through his realm, causing it to destabilize and threaten to break. On the throne, there was a small carving. Love you lots. From your favorite sister, Loki. Loki, Thor shouted out in anger as he destroyed the throne and started to repair his domain. Once she had cleared up everything near the egg, Shiro started to make her way to the surface since there was nothing else to do here. She had a look, but the egg doesn't seem to be hatching just yet. It was still growing despite the amount of mana it had received. Flying to the surface, Shiro could see the complete destruction of the North Pole. While her research base was still intact, the surrounding area was in shambles. Seeing the flood of monsters that continued to flow without signs of stopping, Shiro located Madison immediately. Nantion, take care of evacuation. We'll send all the mechs back since we can deal with this now. The main problem has been taken care of, Shiro said as Nantion nodded his head and made his way to the mech units. Flying towards Madison, Shiro waved her hand and started to control all of the ice. Flicking her finger up, spikes pierced all of the monsters that were nearby. While it may not have killed all of them, the ones that survived were in pure agony as ice formed around their body, locking them in place. Welcome to the party. I've already dealt with a rather rude intruder. How is things on your side? Madison asked as she waved towards Shiro. It went better than expected with the exception of almost fusing myself to the system. We've managed to get 10 living specimens too. They seem to be made of energy and they don't receive any damage from normal attacks. They might also work as a testing dummy for you lot should you want to make new spells that might work on them. Shiro smiled. Oh, then fair enough. Also, the mana in this area is still growing. Doesn't seem to stop. To make matters worse, the crystals are amplifying it and sending it to the egg. With each monster that's killed by us, more mana is being released into the area, Madison said as Shiro surveyed the area with her senses. Immediately noticing the growing powers of the monsters, Shiro couldn't help but frown. As the crystals were amplifying the mana, the monsters that are then spawned in by that mana had their powers increased. If they continued like this, it won't be long until the monsters reached the level of 1,000. While she doubted that they could reach demigod levels, it wasn't impossible. I need to deal with this mana, Shiro thought to herself. She knew that by using a powerful enough spell, she could absorb all the mana in the area, but it wouldn't get rid of it. It'll still flow back to the egg or make stronger monsters. Furrowing her brows, Shiro had an idea. Error, darling. You know how we can edit the code of other beings, right? Would it be possible to add a converter within a spell? Edit it so that the mana is changed to divine energy, Shiro asked as Error was silent for a moment. Turning to Nimue, Error paused before turning back to Shiro. Yes, but that'll require Mother to be the converter. If you want to change it to divine energy, then I'll have to convert it within your body. With the right combination of skills, I do believe Mother can accomplish this. However, I highly advise against that. Your body is already weakened due to what you attempted with me. Adding more stress, even with means of turning back time or repairing yourself, would be disastrous. What if the spell doesn't work? Error asked as Shiro was silent, then patted his head. Oh, don't worry too much. We've got Nimue here. She's basically a demigod that keeps my body from falling apart. We'll be fine, Shiro grinned as Error sighed. You do know that if it does become too dangerous, I will attempt to forcefully cancel your spell from the inside, right? Nimue asked as Shiro nodded her head. Yep, I'm counting on you. Make sure I don't die, okay? Shiro grinned. Hi. Back to work, I suppose. Nimue sighed heavily and disappeared so that she could focus on keeping Shiro's body functional. I don't like the look on your face, Madison said as she immediately had a bad feeling about what Shiro was about to do. I haven't even said anything yet, though. Shiro pouted. You haven't said anything, but I recognize that look on your face. I swear, the only ideas you have are ridiculous ones. Madison clicked her tongue. But they work, no? They do work, but Heis, forget it. Just get it over and done with quickly, and don't hurt yourself too badly. We got Sylvia and Aram, so you don't need to worry about dying, but that doesn't mean you can go destroying your body however you want. Madison sighed and massaged her eyes. Foo, be right back. Shiro laughed as she shot up into the sky. A surge of dark energy erupted from her body as she continued to fly higher. Flying out of the atmosphere, Shiro floated next to one of her satellites that she had stationed in this area. Glancing down, Shiro looked at the North Pole before glancing towards the rest of the world. Seeing the blinking lights of explosions and large chunks of Earth being split apart to reveal more land, Shiro could see the entire planet being transformed. More and more landmass started to burst out of the planet in order to reshape it for the descent of gods. There are quite a few spots of concentrated divine energy too. The expansion of the world is faster than I imagined. I'll need to add more satellites, Shiro thought to herself before clasping her hands together. Closing her eyes, she activated a skill that she had received due to her link with Een. Devour. With her right hand, a giant Tier 7 magic circle started to spread out as it slowly transformed into a magic array. Meanwhile, her left hand was covered with circuits. A string of code appeared before her as Shiro started to edit parts of the skill so that she could convert the mana into divine energy. Since I met Loki, I might as well ask a little help from her family. Shiro chuckled before constructing a secondary magic circle. Since she didn't have any divine energy in her body right now, she could only rely on mana. Remembering Loki's energy from before, Shiro attempted to forcefully establish a connection with mana. While that was happening, Shiro finished the primary magic circle and glanced down at the North Pole. Without saying anything else, Shiro slammed her hand down and the magic circle activated itself. Asterisk, boom. In the distance, she could see land sink down as the magic circle was being carved into the land itself. Making sure to not harm any of her allies, she activated the skill Devour. #####. Looking up at the sky, Madison could see an impossibly large magic array in the sky. Turning her attention to the ground, parts of the ice started to cave in, carving the magic array into the land itself. Beside her, Helion stood with his attention towards the sky. "Shiro stuff?" he asked. "Shiro stuff. You might feel uncomfortable depending on what her spell is." Madison shrugged. Suddenly, she noticed blue motes of light drifting up from the ground and towards the sky. Recognizing them to be concentrated orbs of mana, Madison watched as the crystals amplified how much mana was being absorbed from the area, forming large orbs that floated up. Is she extracting all of the mana from this place? What the F***? ###. Watching the motes of light drift upwards, Shiro furrowed her brows since the absorption was too slow. However, before she could think about changing parts of the spell, a link with Loki had been formed. My, I certainly didn't expect you to contact me this early. How may I help you today?" Loki smiled as Shiro could hear the playfulness in her voice. "Let's just say I've run out of divine energy. I'm planning a little stunt, and well, your family came to mind. Care to make a link between me and Jormungandr?" Shiro asked with a smile. "My son? Sure B. Oh, I see what you're trying to do. Sure, give me a second." After waiting a literal second, Shiro could hear groaning followed by a sigh. "Mum told me to give you my blessing. What kind do you want?" A bored voice rang out in Shiro's mind as she shook her head. "Well, let's just say, how about we establish a little trade? Similar to what I did with Argus and Helios. I make you a little something, and you help me out too. I'll set up a few devices around the world, and you can gorge yourself upon the mana of this world. All that I require from you is to help me convert some of this to divine energy, and when I'm full on divine energy, supply me with condensed mana crystals from the mana." Shiro smiled. "Oh, well, certainly. Mum asked me to help anyways, so I'll do you a better deal if you help me with something." Hearing this, Shiro raised an eyebrow. "What I need help with is rather minor in the grand scheme of things. Injure Uncle Thor until he can't move for a month. He's been pissing me off with his lectures lately, and Mum won't let me fight him. If you can promise me to injure him for a month, I'll continue to convert mana around the world for your use and supply you with divine energy converted from this mana. And if you keep injuring Uncle Thor every so often, I'll even join you in a few fights." He offered as Shiro held herself back from laughing and nodded her head. "That's a deal. I'll injure Thor once things have calmed down a little." Shiro grinned as a crest appeared in front of her, the crest of a serpent wrapping around a tree. Closing her eyes, she carved the same crest into the magic circle. Placing her left hand on the satellite, Shiro connected herself to all of the satellites she placed around the world. Curling her lips into a grin, she started her plan. Suddenly, all around the world, all the satellites started to change as magic circles could be seen appeared in the sky. Linking itself to one another, the world was soon encased with a giant array. "Devour." Shiro grinned. ###. After ending the connection, Jormungandr sent her some of his power. "What was that I heard about your uncle?" Loki asked as she could be seen floating through Jormungandr's walls. "Nothing much. Though who is she? She sounds rather confident and arrogant. She had made quite a few bold claims." Jormungandr asked as Loki laughed. "PFT ha 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 ha. She isn't arrogant. She's sure of her power. As for her claims, well, I can say for sure that she can kill your uncle along with your grandfather. As for she could probably turn you into soup with the help of her daughter." Loki shrugged. Even though she was laughing, Jormungandr knew when his mother was being serious. Before he could even say anything, he felt a sudden stream of energy entering his body through the crest that he had given Shiro. "Also, are you sure you should be wasting time like this? I suggest you start helping her convert the energy. When she says a few, she usually means a lot." Loki smiled as Jormungandr started to turn pale, widening his eyes. The flow of mana was more than what he had expected. Quickly running past Loki, he tried to set up a magic array, but a wave of pain flooded his body. "Here, let me help." Loki laughed, helping her son convert the energy that Shiro was sending through. Loki even had to comfort the serpent as he felt like he was about to explode. If Loki wasn't here to help, he might have exploded on the stop. What does she mean by a few? Even if I'm the world eater, I can't eat a world prepared for the gods. Jormungandr shouted out with tears in his eyes while Loki rested his head on her lap. There. Next time don't agree to her so easily, okay? Okay. Jormungandr nodded, feeling regretful. However, now that he knew it was possible for her to injure Thor heavily, he looked forward to seeing him on the verge of death. For that sight, a little bit of pain now was worth it. Suddenly, for a brief moment, the mana flow of the world halted, as though transported into a vacuum. No more mana flowed into the world, and the transformations were stopped. The land stopped splitting apart. Monsters stopped appeared from the gaps. Every mana-based being in the world felt suffocated as everyone, without fail, glanced up at the sky to see the giant magic array that now encompassed the world, dyeing the sky in its glow. Hovering in space, Shiro started to make some adjustment to her array so that it would let mana flow like usual while making sure it does not overload the world. Make it so that the change was gradual rather than instantaneous. That way, the destruction the change causes should be minimalized. The main problem with the new age is how it transforms the planet within the span of a day. This kind of transformation was disastrous and halts the chance of survival for most people. If the change was gradual, even those that aren't prepared will have a chance. While this may help some that see her as an enemy, she did not mind. Those foolish enough to confront her will sign their own death warrant. But for those that want a second chance, she'll be glad to offer them a path. Clasping her hands together, Shiro carved a spell in front of her. Similar to the layers of protection that was there before the fight with Rokarn, this will ensure the progression into the new age is slow. My, this I cannot allow. A voice rang out behind her as Shiro felt a chill down her back. Widening her eyes, Shiro immediately activated a rune which stopped time around her. Quickly jumping forward, she wanted to make some distance. Pucci. However, her jump was cut short as a blade pierced her chest. Grabbing the sword, Shiro coughed up a mouthful of blood. Immediately activating a few berserk skills to give herself a boost, she elbowed the blade, snapping it in half before releasing a torrent of energy that pushed back everything around her. The magic array around the world fluctuated but eventually stabilized itself. Glaring at the person who stabbed her through the chest, Shiro could see the sword repair itself and recognized it to be nanobots. You're from the side of creation. Shiro squeezed out as she could feel the nanobots trying to destroy her body. Taking a deep breath, she halted its advances by freezing them within her body. Looking at the figure in front of her, Shiro tried her best to memorize their signature, but it was completely foreign. Even if she tried to remember, the information would disappear in an instant. Wearing a pure white robe with golden armor pieces around the chest, waist, and arms, the woman reconfigured her sword into a pair of gloves. On her face was a silver mask that blocked any attempt at trying to see past it. However, Shiro could see a pair of bright red eyes and black hair. Shame? I was hoping to kill you in one go, but the world is already rejecting me. However, I will finish my task. The woman narrowed her eyes at Shiro. So die, and may your rest be peaceful. Closing her eyes, the woman clenched her fist. Pushi. Hundreds of swords pierced out of her body as the nanobots transformed into swords. Runes started to appear as chains linked around her body, stopping her from moving. Trying to muster up the strength to activate a skill, Shiro realized that all of the energy was being drained from her body. Walking up to Shiro, the woman grabbed her by the neck and lifted her up. Trust me, the world would be better without me or you. Suddenly, a rift opened up behind the woman as a blade of light shot forth. Wanting to put up a barrier so that she could kill Shiro, the woman noticed a portal opened up in front of her and Shiro was dragged through. Furrowing her brows, she slammed her hand down, shattering both portals before attempting to grab Shiro once more. However, two swords shot out of the void and attempted to pierce the woman's arms. Clicking her tongue, the woman ducked down to avoid the swords and sent out a chain to grab Shiro. Who the hell do you think you are? Attacking my mom in front of me. A voice rang out, followed by the sharp cry of a bird. Tearing through the void, the woman could see a purple and blue phoenix along with a woman on her head, snapping the nanotech chains apart with her beak. In transformed back into her human form and stood in front of Shiro. Bah, disgusting, she spat out as her eyes were full of anger. Flicking her hair back, In was now wearing a black and purple jacket that seemed to be made from flames. Her hair now had hues of purple and blue mixed in the black. Always on about food. Focus on this *TCH who tried to kill Mom, Lysandra said as she summoned another blade in her hand. Similar to Shiro, her hair was now pure white, which contrasted against the void black wings that sprouted from her back. Clad in black and silver armor, Lysandra glared at the unfamiliar woman in anger. More are approaching this area, the woman muttered before standing up straight. I return soon, firstborn. Your time is limited, she warned before disappearing with a flash of light. Once they were sure that the danger had passed, the two quickly supported Shiro, who was still restrained by the strange runes that continued to siphon her energy at an alarming rate. Furrowing her brows, Lysandra tried to remove the restraints, but Shiro shook her head. Don't touch them. They're made from creation energy, so it'll only hurt you if you touch them. Don't worry, I got it covered. Shiro smiled as circuits appeared on her arm. Gritting her teeth, she reached towards the blade and tapped it with her finger. In an instant, circuits spread through all of the foreign nanobots that was floating through her body. Error. Help me upload these commands without changing anything else. I can't exactly do it with them draining my energy. Without saying anything else, Error started to follow Shiro's command as he started to overwrite the code within the nanobots. Unfortunately, there were very little he could do as any changes he made would be erased and reverted to their previous state. With no other choice, he put them into a stasis for now, but Shiro will need to constantly funnel a majority of her mana to keep it from breaking the seal. Currently, the nanobots were still hostile to her and would attempt to kill her the moment they're out of stasis. But with the help of Error, she should be able to extract a small portion in order to study it. Taking a deep breath, Shiro closed her eyes and started to control the nanobots with Error's help. She couldn't remove it from her body as it had already partially fused to her body. However, she could reshape it so that it was easier for her to move. After all, moving around with blades through her chest was rather annoying. Transforming it into a bracelet that continued to siphon her mana, Shiro healed her body with the help of Lysandra. With that problem now dealt with somewhat, it's good to have you back. How are you feeling? Does your body hurt? Shiro asked as she scanned Lysandra's body. It's fine, Mum. We can talk more when we get back. Lysandra smiled as she hugged Shiro. There's plenty to talk about. Though if it wasn't for the fact that I felt some weird reptile with the same power as me, I wouldn't have located Mum so quickly. If we didn't come in time, you would have died. Een pouted as Shiro chuckled and patted her head. Don't worry, I had it covered somewhat. Shiro grinned as her other plan would be to overload her body with energy through stacking berserk skills, then activating her limit break from the Pandora set of skills to give her that extra boost that she needed. Who knows, if that didn't work, she had other skills she could use. She was just glad that she didn't need to resort to those methods. Hugging them both, Shiro made her way back with the two of them. Returning back to the research base, Shiro could see that most of the monsters have stopped spawning. Those that were still appearing were taken care of quickly by the mech pilots, while everyone focused on cleanup. Seeing Shiro, Een, and Lysandra together, the party rushed over. Wait, what happened? Madison asked as she immediately noticed how weak Shiro's aura had become. Before Shiro could even respond, Nimue appeared, clearly annoyed. She was attacked from behind by someone that could control nanobots. We're guessing she's from the side of creation, so her attack was extra potent on Shiro. She's managed to halt the nanobots for now, but she has to keep the seal up at all times. Nimue huffed as Shiro scratched her head. Let me have a look at your wounds. Sylvia sighed, but Shiro shook her head. It's fine. I can't exactly remove these from my body either. Plus, they're good for research. I was stumped on how to fuse my own nanobots with creation, so this might be the hint I need. But let's not talk about that for now. How's the egg? Shiro asked curiously. No changes. It seems like its growth had been halted with whatever you did in space. However, halted wouldn't be the right term. It would be more accurate to say that it's slowed down considerably. It's still absorbing as much mana as it can, Nantian said as furrowed his brows at Shiro's condition. Well, that's good then. Are you able to get some of the mechs to transport some nanobots to the base? I want to set up here while Asharia stays out of sight for now in case any gods decide to pay us a visit. Considering that Poseidon was here earlier, I wouldn't ignore the possibility of more gods. Shiro smiled. All right. Nantian nodded as he knew that Shiro wanted to lay down for a while. not just to recover her wounds, but to experiment on her new test subjects as well. I'll set up your lab as well so that you can start whenever you're ready. Hearing this, Shiro blinked her eyes in surprise before nodding her head. I'll be troubling you then. Seeing Nantion disappear, Shiro turned to Ian and Lysandra. As for you two, care to tell me a little about your adventures while Ian makes me something tasty to eat? I am craving her cooking. Shiro grinned as Ian chuckled and nodded her head. Sure, but I haven't cooked much, so there might be a higher chance of failure which will kill your taste buds instead. Ian shrugged, splitting the team for now so that they can get more work done. Shiro, Nantion, Ian and Lysandra made their way to the med bay in the research station. Beside the med bay, Nantion started to reconstruct Shiro's lab that she had in Asharia. After all, she wanted to be near the egg for when it does hatch eventually. Plus, she slowed down its growth, so there was no telling what that might have done to the egg. While Nantion was making the lab, Ian was cooking some food near, while Lysandra was talking about what they had been up to. After I woke up, it was a bit hard to move around since my body was on verge of becoming fallen. Breathing was hard, moving was hard, and in general my body was in pain. Since the transformation was halted, I was stuck in a state between normal and fallen. However, unlike Cyrodiil, it wasn't a stable state. My body was healing and crumbling away at the same time. With the help of Beelzebub, we managed to stabilize my body temporarily, but it wasn't a long-lasting solution. Therefore, Ian visited different libraries in the world and looked for any books that might be able to help. Eventually, we found a book that led us to a special dungeon that was related to gods and angels. It was originally located in Vatican City, but the location had moved a few decades ago, and not many knew where it was. ###. Bang. Slamming the door open, Ian burst into Lysandra's room. Sis, I found something that might be able to help. Look, this book spoke of fallen angels and normal angels. With your body state, this might be what you need. The original location of the dungeon should be in Vatican City, but it's not there anymore. Want to come with me to look for any clues? If we're lucky, we should be able to find some hints. If not, we can probably raid some religious sites that have ties with angels. Ian said as she sat next to Lysandra's bed. Sure, though I don't think I can fight anyone in my current state. Wouldn't I be a burden? Lysandra asked with a sigh. Flinching slightly from the pain, she tried to relax her body as much as she could. In her current state, even the simple act of signing caused her a great deal of pain. What burden? You forget who your big sis is. Plus, what kind of sister would I be if I considered you a burden? A big sister should look out for her younger sister and help when she's in need. It's better if you're at the site yourself, so of course I'll try my best to protect you. Not to mention, I'm strong. Like crazy strong, so I can defeat anyone that comes our way. Ian grinned in a manner similar to Shiro, causing Lysandra to chuckle. All right, is there anything we need to bring? Lysandra asked as Ian nodded. 2 things. You and something that Mum is familiar with. I had asked Nantion to borrow this for a while, and he said yes since he had a few prepare. Ian smiled as she pulled out a familiar pink wheelchair from the rift. Seeing this, Lysandra could feel her smile twitch as she did not like the color pink. She preferred black or white, similar to Shiro's taste in clothing, and pink was certainly not on her list of preferred colors. I even asked Aram to make you a matching outfit for this too. Ian continued as she wasn't finished. Reaching into the rift, she pulled out a white and pink long-sleeved shirt along with a pink dress and a pair of white stockings that had pink frills. For the last item, she pulled out a pair of pink boots that matched the outfit. No, Lysandra refused, but Ian only stepped closer. Big sis, don't do this. Lysandra begged as she tried to act as pitifully as she could. However, without saying anything, Ian started to change Lysandra into her new outfit before lifting her and placing her on the wheelchair. Now equipped with both a pink outfit and a pink wheelchair, Lysandra could feel her face burn with shame as she pulled up the neck of her shirt to hide her face, while Ian pushed from behind. Making sure she took the long way to the teleport hall, Ian wanted to show off to everyone how cute her little sister was. Even though she was feared in battle, she had a cute side like this to her. While Ian was having fun, Lysandra wanted nothing but to bury herself in the ground to avoid the shame. Once they reached the teleport hall, Ian teleported the two of them back to Vatican City. Upon arriving, she could see the ruins of the once great city. The past image of people wandering the streets was now replaced by a horde of monsters that continuously looked for any survivors. Heis. Sighing heavily, Lysandra felt regretful for those that used to live here. The lucky ones, if you could call them that, would have survived and left this city, while those unfortunate would have died when the first change began. Shall we get to searching? These ruins won't show their secrets on their own. Ian smiled as Lysandra nodded her head. All right, big sis will go clear the way. I'll be right back. Ian reassured as her aura flared around her. Jumping out of the teleport shrine, Ian transformed into a phoenix, setting fire to her surroundings in an instant. Monsters that were caught were turned to ash. Flying above the city, she flapped her wings and created several magic circles that hurled down meteors that split into fragments that homed in onto the surviving monsters, extinguishing their life with a single hit. Sending out her senses, Ian smiled after seeing that most of the monsters had been eliminated while those that are still roaming will pose no threat to Lysandra. Transforming back to her human form, she pushed Lysandra's wheelchair towards where the dungeon used to be. According to the records, the dungeon should have been located in the heart of the main cathedral. However, after the Pope was changed, the dungeon mysteriously disappeared. In days of old, each Pope would enter the dungeon solo, and should they prove to be worthy, they would be granted a class unique to the Pope. Ian started to explain as they made their way through the city. But when the dungeon disappeared, so did the chance to get that unique class. Each of the Popes after had no such power and was no more powerful than the average adventurer. If not for the fact that they still had some privileges, the paladins and knights would have taken over long ago. Though once the world changed after the first transformation, the paladins and knights have taken over, migrating to the Southern Isles with all the remaining survivors. There hasn't been any recent news from there, but according to what I've read on the last report, they've created a small underground village within one of the ruins. They call it Sanctuary, but it's more akin to a prison. They can't get out since a queen lived nearby in her city while monsters swarm the land, air, and oceans. The knights might live, but they won't be able to protect the others that follow them. I suggest that be our next destination once we finish with this place. What do you think? I'm guessing that some of the higher-ranked paladins might be able to help you with some information. Ian smiled as Lysandra nodded her head. Should we get others to help? Now we should be good. Plus, they're busy as hell anyways. You know Aram's doing her research. Helian's trying to find more ways to upgrade Mum's sword. Revel and Kiona are playing games. Nantion is making sure everything is in order, and Sylvia is head of the hospitals. So naturally it'll be a little duo adventure for the two of us. Ian grinned as Lysandra was 90% sure that they could have probably got Revel's help considering he's only playing games. No, I'm not letting a stinking lazy lizard join our journey. Ian pouted in annoyance as Lysandra chuckled since that was the real reason all along. We should be seeing the cathedral around the corner now. If it was before the New Age, we would have been able to see the top of the building from afar, but alas, the New Age was not so kind on architecture. Ian shrugged as they entered a clearing that used to be a grand path towards the cathedral. Looking at the numerous collapsed towers, Ian could see the still disintegrating corpse of a monster laying in the center. Ignoring it for now, she was about to continue when a booming voice rang out. None shall die in the land of the holy. Suddenly, mana erupted around her as the corpse of the monster suddenly regenerated. While this is certainly a problem, wasn't expecting company, Ian muttered as she placed a barrier around Lysandra. Walking over to the monster that was still trying to get back onto its feet, Ian narrowed her eyes and crushed its head with her leg before opening her mouth. Biting down on the monster, the body was drained until nothing but skin and bones was left. Blurred, disgusting. I would rather cook it, but something tells me your power stops them from dying in conventional means. Transforming them into energy doesn't really kill them. Ian shrugged while looking towards the broken cathedral. On the roof, a single figure stood. A broken cape, cracked armor, and a missing arm. But despite the numerous wounds, the aura he radiated was almost threatening to Ian. The aura of this armored figure rang some alarm bells in her mind, but not enough to be fully serious. None shall die in the land of the holy. By my blade, by my will, they will live. The paladin shouted out as he charged towards her. A holy aura wrapped around his sword as he twisted his body and cleaved his sword down, releasing a wave of energy that tore the ground apart. Raising her eyebrow, Ian opened her mouth and ate all of the energy. Quite a fluffy taste. Your energy is one of the better ones I've tasted. Congrats. Ian praised while jumping to the side to dodge his next attack. Now that he was in close proximity, Ian took this time to see his name tag. Alexander LVL 900 Fallen Paladin of Protection. None shall die in the land of the holy. He shouted out as Ian frowned, understanding that he had lost his mind after becoming fallen. Shame. Ian shook her head. Sidestepping his next strike, Ian used her left hand to grab his wrist while her right palm pressed against his chest. Asterisk bang. Letting out a pulse of energy, The upper half of the paladin's body was torn to shreds. Shaking her head, In was about to walk away when she heard the same line once more. None shall die, the paladin muttered as his body started to repair itself. In the land of the holy, standing back up, his arm regenerated and a blade appeared by his side, letting out a war cry. Hundreds of mana signals could be felt surrounding them. One by one, the dead paladins and knights started to rise up from the dead, uttering the same line. So dedicated to your cause, even after losing your mind. You have my respects. But sorry, too many have already died. Een sighed as she stomped her foot down. Sparks appeared around them as Een raised her hand before snapping her fingers. Asterisk click. Boom. Exploding into pillars of fire. Een grabbed Alexander by the head and narrowed her eyes, enveloping his body in a black flame that consumed his essence. Wanted to make sure he didn't resurrect a second time. None shall die. Alexander struggled as Een opened her mouth. They didn't die. They're alive in the Southern Isles. They're all alive and well. You did your job properly, so now rest. Hearing this, tears could be seen under the helmet as the last of Alexander was consumed by the flames. Shaking her head, Een made her way back to Lysandra. It's sad, isn't it, to want to protect but lack the power? With no other choice, he chose a path of no return so that people could survive this devastation. Lysandra lamented as Een nodded her head. Amen. Once we're done with this place, let's see if we can convince them to come to Asharia. Agreeing with Een, the two gave the fallen paladins a moment of silence in respect for their sacrifices. Entering through the broken gates of the cathedral, Een searched through the rubble in hopes of finding anything that could be useful. Spending a few hours to search the entire cathedral carefully, Een found nothing useful above ground. However, she did find a pathway below ground that led to more chambers along with a library. With all of the runes around the library, it was not surprising that it was still intact. However, the fact that such a powerful protection array was down here without anyone's notice was strange, since there was not a single bit of mana being released from this place. Standing in front of the chained gates that led to the library, Een was stumped. She had tried to use every method possible, but was unable to get in. The same runes were present in the rift, stopping her from entering. Well, I definitely want to check this place out, but neither violence nor teleporting works. You think they would leave a spare key around here? Een asked as Lysandra shook her head. I doubt it. It's probably something only the highest members are allowed to access along with the Pope. I do have an idea, but it might hurt. Just trust me, okay? Lysandra shrugged as she placed her hand against the gates. Biting her lip, she released some of Beelzebub's seal, causing a flow of destructive energy to flow through her arm. Gritting her teeth, she allowed the seal to open some more as she corroded the protective runes. Once the runes were destroyed, Lysandra immediately reactivated the seal, halting the spread, but more of her wings have become black. As for her arm, the flesh around her arm had crumbled away to ash, and healing was slowed down to the point it was barely noticeable. Before she could say anything, Een kneeled down next to her and started to wrap her arm in a bandage while applying some healing. She didn't know much healing, but as a phoenix, her power naturally had the power to heal. It wasn't enough to heal the wound, but relieving some of the pain was possible. You're an idiot just like Mom. Een sighed as Lysandra chuckled. But is the path not open now? Shall we go? Rolling her eyes, Een nodded and made her way in with Lysandra. Stepping into the library, the two of them received a notification on their system interface. Welcome to the Holy Library. Holy Library? Well, if there's a system notification, then hopefully it should be rather helpful for us. Een remarked as they walked. Passing the first set of doors, they were shocked by the sight. In front of them, they could see a giant golden staircase that spiraled down with no end in sight. Rows upon rows of books could be seen on the walls with a pillar in the center that was also filled with books. However, the ones in the pillar were hidden behind locks while those on the walls were without protection. Sending her senses down, Een realized that it was blocked and her senses could only go as far as her eyes could see. Suddenly golden chains dropped down from the ceiling as they could see a faint figure kneeling on the pillar. H's body seemed ephemeral as his body looked as though it was dissolving into golden mist. They couldn't see his face as it was hidden behind a mask linked to chains that was binding his body. Stabbed into the pillar was anchors that held his chains in place. Welcome. I am the overseer of this library. Thou shan't remove any scriptures. Thou shan't damage any scriptures. The scriptures on the wall are free to be read, but those on the pillar can only be accessed by the Pope or those of sufficient authority. If thou breaks any of the rules, I will have to remove you from this location. A voice rang out in their mind as the two looked at one another. Probably shouldn't break the rules out of respect. Ian shrugged as Lysandra agreed. Just as they were about to reach for the first book, the overseer moved and leaned to get a better look at Lysandra. You're an angel, aren't you? But that shouldn't be possible, he asked as Lysandra looked up in confusion. All the angels have been barred from entering this realm after the Pope broke the taboo. The dungeon had been removed, and the future popes are no longer allowed the same authority. So why is an angel here? He asked as Lysandra perked her ears up in curiosity. Taboo? I don't know anything about the taboo or the Pope, but I was transformed into an angel by a god in a dungeon, then my mother dragged me out to this realm. Oh, just so you know, my mother was native to realm, and I was native to the dungeon. Hearing this, the overseer paused before returning to his previous position. That usually shouldn't be the case. But regardless, in accordance to the pact I have made, thou art an angel, therefore the scriptures and the pillar are open to you. The same rules apply, the overseer said before closing his eyes. However, Lysandra was more curious about the taboo that he spoke about. Excuse me, are you able to tell me more about the taboo? I have sworn an oath of secrecy. Perhaps you may find information in the books, but I am not able to tell you. Hearing this, Lysandra could only sigh while Ian shrugged. Well, you heard him. I'll check the books on the walls while you check the ones on the pillar. Agreeing with Ian, Lysandra started to flick through the documents. Unfortunately, most of the documents were in a language that she didn't understand, but those that she could understood had details on certain classes that one could obtain. Many of these were high-level classes that can only be obtained with a certain amount of faith. Aside from books that contained class details, there was also scriptures that had stories, dungeon locations, history, and key details about the church. Unfortunately, most of them were of no interest to Lysandra as they didn't help with her condition at all, and didn't make progress either as all the books she reads were all boring. TSK, aren't there anything useful here? Ian pouted as Lysandra stayed silent, but agreed with her. Meanwhile, the overseer opened his eyes. There are no libraries that keep the most important information at the front. Hearing this, Ian felt as though a vein was about to burst. Why the hell didn't you say that from the start? Because you never asked. Realizing that the overseer read her mind, Ian stayed silent and made her way down to the very bottom of the library with Lysandra. Mumbling something under his breath, the overseer cast a spell that unlocked all the doors leading down so that Lysandra could read everything at will. As they made their way down, they could feel the mana slowly rise. Each of the books seemed to radiate their own mana signature as Lysandra skimmed their titles. Most of them had details on holy wars, people who died, notable figures, their life accomplishments, and what they did to obtain their classes. There were even records of higher beings such as angels, archangels, seraphs, and so on. Seeing that this was probably a good place to start, both Ian and Lysandra started to browse through the books in order to find a way to solve her current predicament. While reading the scripture in her hands, Lysandra came across an extract that talked about fallen angels. Many fallen angels are not heretics as many would believe. Similar to paladins who break their oath and tap into a dark power in order to protect, fallen angels are those that had given in to their destruction nature in order to gain a boost in power. Once they achieved the task, the power would then turn on them, corrupting them from the inside. Once corrupted, the angels would transform into powerful demons who would have little to no memory of their time as angels. In rare cases, they may have vague recollections. In order to recruit more angels into the holy ranks, the fifth pope of the new calendar created a means to ascend man into higher beings. However, once they appear, they would be sent away to join the holy ranks. Should the situation require their power, the angels will descend to lend aid. Reading more, Lysandra read about the methods of transforming one into an angel along with those that had been transformed. Flicking past the list of names, Lysandra wanted to find information on those that chose to become fallen but never finished their transformation. So you are looking for the information on fallen angels. I had assumed your wounds were from entering this world, but it seems like that is not the case. Perhaps I can find a book for you. Hearing the overseer's words, Lysandra looked up in surprise. Thank you. Can you show me a book that contains information on fallen angels that never finished their transformation? I was exposed to destructive energy that turns people into fallen, but my transformation was halted midway, leaving me in this state. If possible, I would rather not become fallen. Lysandra replied, I see. Follow the sparrow. It should lead you to the book you seek. Suddenly, an illusionary sparrow appeared in front of her and started to fly further into the library. Thank you. Thanking him one more time, she followed after the sparrow with Yin's help. Watching the two leave, the overseer smiled softly and chuckled, tilting his head back. He looked up at the skies and shook his head. Making their way to the very bottom, they were greeted with a labyrinth of sorts. Rows upon rows of bookshelves could be seen as the sparrow transformed into a wisp of energy that lit up one of the shelves. Approaching the bookshelf, they glanced at the first few books and frowned. Experimental records of corrupted angels. Experimental records of fallen. Documentation on failed experiment Omega. Looking at each other, they grabbed a few books and started to read. Most of the details were gruesome torture, like experiment done on fallen angels that were corrupted due to greed rather than for protection. Many of these experiments caused them to feel a deep sense of disgust, as they were experimented with in every way possible. Cross-breeding with other species to see if the corruption continues, organ transplants on non-corrupted beings, and so on. Each of the experiments were noted down with every detail. Even the smallest change was written down. As she continued to read, Lysandra was horrified to find out that they created a different kind of ascension, ones that forcefully transformed them into fallen against their will, so that they could have more test subjects to find out the true nature of the corruption. Villages that had little to zero importance were destroyed. During one of these experiments, there was several anomalies that would appear every so often. Ascensions that would fail midway, leading to angels with an unbalanced nature. Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, Lysandra read about the records. Angels with an unbalanced nature could not move or fight, as they were in constant agony. Their mind were being bombarded by dark thoughts, while their body refused to transform, causing a split between body and soul. This split would often kill the angel within the span of a month, depending on their willpower. Those with weak willpower will transform into a new race within a single day. Their bodies mangled to the point it was barely recognizable. They were titled screaming terrors, as several mouths would grow so that their agony could be heard. Most of the screamers shared the similar traits of a mangled body that had multiple mouths, wings that grew wherever there was room, hollowed eyes that would flow with black substance should any living being be near their vicinity. They would show a great deal of hostility to all forms of life. During one experiment where a single screaming terror was released into the wild to see its effect on nature, they observed the being corrupting other monsters, transforming them into similar beings only with a different base race. A single scratch was all it took for the transformation to take place, as the entire area had to be purged before things got out of hand. From that day on, personal tasked with experimenting on the screaming terrors had to go through rigorous training to understand all of the procedures. Most of the members had thought that the experiments on the terrors had ceased, but only those trusted were allowed to know the truth. Of course, this didn't mean the other unbalanced angels were spared from experiment. Far from it. They were put through even more agony in order to see what caused them to turn into screaming terrors before being terminated to avoid spread. It turns out that while the body rejected the transformation, should the soul break completely, they would be transformed. It's only because the body rejected that they hold some resemblance to what they were previously. Should their body accept the change, they would transform into beings they called the Null Sentinels. They were akin to the archangels, but every living being was their enemy, and the first observation of the Null Sentinel almost destroyed the entire facility. Several angels were sent down to slay the beast, but many died in the process. As for those with body as strong body and will, they would eventually disintegrate to ash, as everything has a limit. The unbalanced nature would continue to absorb their life essence until nothing was left. There was, however, one exception. That angel had somehow adapted to the change, becoming a pure fallen, but none of the drawback. They didn't change to become a demon once their task was fulfilled, with one surviving everything. Their greed to create more just like him increased as their experiment continued at a larger scale. From villages to eventually cities, the Vatican waged holy wars when everything was in turmoil. With an influx of subjects to test on, they attempted to recreate the miracle, but every test failed. Eventually, they experimented with angels by capturing them before they could ascend. As she flipped the page, Lysandra noticed that the pages seemed to have been ripped out. Browsing through other books, she could only find details on prior experiments, but none pertaining that of experiments on angels that were captured during their ascension. Furrowing her brows, she tried to look at other shelves, but they hold the Vatican's dark history on other areas. The rest of the records were erased by order of the new pope, when things had to come to a halt. There can be no more records on the experimentations, lest the greed of humans break the taboo once more. This is about as much as you can find out, I'm afraid. The overseer's voice rang out again as Lysandra sighed. Why all of the experimentation? Why was there a need to hurt their fellow people in such ways just for power? I thought the church was meant to be all things good about humans. What is all of this? Lysandra asked as she felt sorrowful at their history. Bad things done in good intentions. Though I cannot deny that good intentions were warped somewhere down in the line. But what's done is done. The ones that need to be punished have been punished. While it could not change the fact that all of this had already happened, history never repeated itself. The Vatican made sure it did not tread down the path of darkness again, as their focus was on helping the people. With the Pope no longer being able to ascend while remaining in the realm of man, they had to find new ways to protect. Better, more righteous options that did not involve in tampering with human lives. I sit here as a testament to their views against the actions of old. The overseer chuckled. From my knowledge, there should be more records in the south and west branches. They are where the experiments were being held, so you should find some records they might have left behind. Amen. Who are you? To be locked in this place to act as an overseer. You speak as though you were involved with the experiments. Lysandra asked with pity in her eyes. I was the one that survived. I tried to help them make more of my kind. That is all I can say. My punishment is to be locked in this place, forever guarding the knowledge left here so that it cannot be repeated. I live as a demonstration to those who attempted to revel in the dark knowledge. However, I can see that you'll do no such thing. You merely want to survive. And so, I give you what knowledge I can. Seek out the branches in the west and south. I hope that you can find whatever will help you survive like I did. The overseer laughed as Lysandra nodded her head. Making her way out of the library, Lysandra glanced at the overseer and thanked him once more before leaving. Looking at the two, the overseer smiled, seeing his own figure overlapping Lysandra's. The darkness in her wings wanted to corrupt her, but their march was halted. Opening his mouth, he decided to say nothing and activated a spell without their knowing. A wisp of golden energy floated over, transforming into a small crest that disassembled itself and assisted in holding back the corruption for now. Suddenly, Lysandra felt a soothing energy in her body as the pain faded ever so slightly. Glancing back, she could see the overseer smiling and knew that he must have done something to help her. Before she could show gratitude, the doors to the library repaired itself and slammed shut. Rather rude, isn't he? Ian remarked, seeing that he slammed the door shut. Not really. If anything, he was quite helpful. Lysandra chuckled as Ian shrugged her shoulder. Well then, shall we go to the south or west? Ian asked. Let's go the south. There are people there from the Vatican too. If we're lucky, we can ask them for directions. Sounds like a plan. But first let's rest for the night. It's already getting pretty dark since we spent a little too long in the library, Ian said as she looked at the setting sun. Setting up camp, she made a quiet meal for Lysandra while making sure all of the seals were okay. That night, the overseer found himself dreaming about old memories. Flashes of memories flickered past his mind, from his time in confinement, the time he managed to ascend and survive the transformation. He could still remember the looks of reverence he received from the people. Mixed in with the reverence was gazes of greed and lust for power as they wanted to know his secret, but he himself was unsure. However, if he could do some good with this power, then so be it. While he disliked the people who experimented on him, he had a responsibility as one with such power. He had to be a guardian for those who can't defend themselves. A little bit of suffering now was worth it if he could help them. Kneeling down in front of the Pope, he could remember the words he heard that day. From this day on, by the will of God, I bestow upon you the name of Azrael.